Every woman knows these men. The charmer who sweeps you off your feet, then leaves chaos in his wake. Or the guy who looks perfect on paper, but makes you cringe in real life. The steady one you almost overlook? Jane Austen sketched these men 2 centuries ago. Wickham, Collins, Bingley, and Darcy. 4 men, 4 archetypes. And her warnings are still a survival guide for women today. Here's the mistake we keep making. We treat Jane Austen and Pride and Prejudice like it's just some romance novel with empire waist dresses and witty dialogue. But it's sharper than that. It's a field guide for modern discernment. Because the truth is, everyone knows someone who's fallen for a Wickham or settled for a Collins. And Jane Austen is practically shouting at us, character matters more than charm, more than status, and certainly more than that initial rush of attraction. Hi, I'm Tracy, and today's episode in our Typecast series, we're not ranking the men of Pride and Prejudice. We're pulling out the test that Jane Austen left us over 200 years ago to help us navigate friendships, romances, and even the leaders around us. So the famous Mr. Darcy. He's the one that everyone misjudges at first. He comes off as arrogant, standoffish, rude. But underneath all that, he's actually principled and loyal, and even willing to change when he realizes he's been wrong. Today, Darcy's that guy you might dismiss after the first date because he didn't initially dazzle you or he seemed too reserved. But that's the exact trap that Jane Austen is warning us about. Like, don't write off the guy who proves steady over time while you give endless second chances to the one who just flatters you. Here's my take on what Jane Austen was saying. Don't confuse awkwardness with arrogance, and remember that character sometimes comes wrapped in a really rough exterior, and if you walk away too soon, you'll miss it. How about Mr. Bingley? In the beginning, he's everyone's favorite. He's kind, charming, warm. He's the man who brings flowers, who knows how to make everyone feel comfortable, and he genuinely means it. But his weakness, he doesn't stand firm. The moment a louder voice comes in his ear, he backs off. Today, that looks like the boyfriend who's great to you until his friends tell him not to commit. Or maybe it's a coworker who's really kind and wants to stand up for you. But when the boss comes, then suddenly he's quiet. So what was Jane Austen saying here? Niceness feels safe, but it isn't always strength. A kind heart without backbone can leave you exposed when the storms come. Of course, that doesn't mean you should discard this guy. There are pros and cons to that personality type, right? Just like with all of us. The good side is that he's flexible with a generous spirit, but this is where you should consider him and take a good hard look at yourself. If he learns to stretch himself and stand firm, even when it's tough, that's a great sign. You can argue that Mr. Bingley did that when he decided to marry Jane in spite of his sisters. But on the other hand, you should consider yourself. If you're really strong-willed, if you're the kind of woman who tends to win every argument, then you might end up dominating that relationship. For example, Bingley and Elizabeth, if they had been together, that might not have worked in the long term because Elizabeth would have had a hard time respecting Bingley. But you may need to consider whether you need to grow. I've seen way too many women in their rush to speak their mind become way too brash, way too harsh, and lack all grace. Consider whether you might need to be a little more gentle in your approach and even a little slower to speak sometimes. Okay, next, let's talk about the villain, Mr. Wickham. He's the red flag, right? He's handsome, witty, and instantly likable. He's the man who knows how to win the room, say the right thing, and make you feel special. But behind it all, there's lies and destruction, and usually a lot of chaos. This is the guy who texts you late at night. Yeah, that guy. And who pays you attention just long enough to get you hooked. But then he disappears when it's inconvenient. He's the guy whose Instagram looks perfect, but his private life is actually a mess. He's toxic. But here's the thing. It's really easy to spot a toxic man in someone else's life. It's a lot harder when he's in your life. Even Elizabeth Bennet couldn't spot Wickham in the beginning, and she was no lightweight, silly Lydia. So what was Jane Austen saying here? If a man dazzles you instantly, but then disappoints you, he's probably a Wickham. And Wickhams don't just lack integrity, they leave a bunch of damage and wreckage in their wake. So take time to assess people who are really smooth and likable up front. They could be Wickhams, or they could be all right. They could be Bingleys. And then there's Reverend Collins. On paper, he seems perfect. He's respectable, well-connected, ambitious, even religious. But in reality, he's pompous, insecure, even ridiculous. And Austen doesn't just mock him. It's a warning for us. Don't just settle for what looks good on paper. Today, that's the guy who's got the impressive resume, who looks perfect on LinkedIn, who talks a big game about career and stability. But in real life, he's tone deaf, socially inept, and honestly embarrassing when it matters. titles. What's Jane Austen saying here? Titles and credentials don't guarantee good character. Don't confuse a stable paycheck or a polished resume with the ability to love and lead well. Stability is great. Having a family is great. But does anybody really think Charlotte Lucas made the right decision in choosing to marry Collins? But before we go any further, if these archetypes are speaking to you, hit subscribe. Pride and Prejudice may be 2 centuries old, but it's still showing us how to avoid heartbreak today. Next, I want to talk about Darcy and Wickham, the 2 men that really got to Lizzie. Austen was genius in how she wrote these opposites into the story. Darcy and Wickham look the same on paper, right? They're both tall, handsome, and raised well. But personality-wise, at least in the beginning, Wickham shines while Darcy is just frustrating. But over time, Austen flips the script. Wickham turns out to be really shallow, and Darcy is the one with depth of character and steadiness. If you didn't grow up around healthy relationships, or you're finding it hard to have a healthy relationship today, this is where Jane Austen's advice can really be helpful. We don't have to learn it firsthand the hard way. So Pride and Prejudice is this incredible story that shows us the difference between personality and character. Wickham arguably has the better personality, although the mystery surrounding Darcy has its own kind of unique appeal. It just takes longer to get to know him. But character matters more, and if you can't tell the difference between personality and character, you'll chase the wrong man every time. You'll harshly judge the guy on the first date and miss going out with Darcy on the second date, all the while getting strung along by Wickham's texts until he actually ghosts you. Here's why this is so important when you're considering spending the rest of your life with someone. Don't mistake difficulty for arrogance, and definitely don't mistake charm for character. If you do, you'll end up wasting your best years dating the wrong guy. So let's put these guys side by side. Darcy has a hard shell but deep strength. Bingley has a kind heart, but sometimes a weak will. Wickham, flashy surface, rotten core. And lastly, Collins, the polished resume, but the shallow soul. Austen is showing us a pattern that hasn't changed. We keep judging men by appearances, right? Like how they look on a dating profile, what they say in the moment, what they post online. And every time we do that, we miss the one test that actually matters, proven character over time. You'll meet every one of these guys over time in your life, the Wickham, the Collins, the Bingley, and if you're wise enough to not overlook him, you'll meet a Darcy. So which man would you have chosen? If you're dating, which man are you choosing right now? Austen makes her opinion clear, but the real takeaway is this: don't judge a man on how he makes you feel in a moment. Think about who he proves himself to be over time, and especially when it costs him something. Because charm is a performance and status can change, but character tells you something. And if you want to build a life that lasts, choose the man whose character is proven, not the one who just makes promises. So if this resonated with you and you would like more advice, not just on how to pick the right man, but how to avoid the wrong one, check out our episode called How to Spot a Predator. See you next time.